I think the way this will go is the bankers in the Western world will continue to inflate the money supply until they get to a point where they can't anymore. They will pay for all the deficits with inflation until they can't. And at the point that they can't, they'll switch to taxation. And the taxation it'll come progressively in the form of income taxes. And then the third phase, it'll come in the form of property taxes. They won't be able to raise enough money with income tax, so it'll become a property tax. And before you recoil in horror, just keep in mind in Florida, there is no income tax, but there is property tax, and it's 2% a year on all of your real estate property. Maybe they'll assess the property up and it becomes 2% of property that's worth 50% more, and they raise their taxes 50%. Or maybe they'll extend it from just your residential real estate to commercial real estate to other forms of property. I think it'll be a political process. There'll be a lot of back and forth negotiation. Each state will do it differently. Each city will do it differently. Each country will do it differently. Each administration will do it differently. But eventually, they'll start taxing things more. Maybe they'll say 2% of all your stocks, 2% of all your crypto, 2% of all your everything. I don't know. What I do know is that Bitcoin is the best property to hold when that time comes. If you hold a building in California, you won't be able to move it to Wyoming, but you will be able to move the Bitcoin from California to Wyoming. And if you have a building in the middle of Manhattan, it'll be hard to hide it. Everybody will walk past it and they'll say, there's a rich person with a building, let's go ahead and tax that more. But if you have Bitcoin, people won't walk past you saying, well, that person's got a lot of money, because they won't be seeing it. If I do pass a law, maybe if I jack the tax rate to 2, 3, 4% a year on land or a building or a company stock, you can't move the headquarters of Apple Computer to Monaco. You can't move the Rockefeller Center to Monaco. And you can't move the land underneath the Rockefeller Center to Monaco. But you can move $1 billion of Bitcoin to Monaco. So the Apple headquarters it's a beautiful piece of property, but it doesn't count as a fungible piece of property. A very rich corporation in Beijing is never going to buy the Apple headquarters when they have to sell it or they have to move it. So as we look forward, there'll be inflation, and you want to own property to protect yourself from inflation. But you want to own the highest quality property, and the definition of highest quality property is hardest to steal, hardest to tax, easiest to move, most desirable by everybody on earth. Also, easiest to upgrade. Why is an acre in New York City more valuable than an acre in the middle of Kansas? They're both an acre. The acre in New York City is more valuable because it's built on granite. It's very solid. You can build a 100-story building on it. It's not sand. It's not soil. But the second reason it's more valuable is because you can develop it into more things, right? Bitcoin you can develop because it's an open protocol. So you can build thousands of layer 2 and layer 3 applications on it anywhere in the world. That's why you want to own that. That's why Bitcoin is, if you have $1 billion of Bitcoin, that's why it's better than $1 billion of gold, or $1 billion worth of land, or $1 billion worth of real estate, or $1 billion worth of a company. All of those are properties, but they're easier to impair, harder to develop, harder to move. So if you're taking the long view, find the highest quality property you can, hold it for the long term. And I wouldn't worry so much about the political process, right? If the politicians pursue rampant inflation, the highest quality property will benefit. If they start to do income tax, if they crank the income tax to 90%, you want to own the highest quality property because that's the property that you don't have to sell. The way you avoid income tax is you never sell it. Low quality property can be impaired, and if you think it can be impaired, you have to sell it, and when you sell it, you'll take a capital gains tax. If you want to move from here to Monaco, you'll have to sell your property in wherever you live in order to go to Monaco, and you won't get hit with a capital gains tax or an income tax. So high quality property protects you from income tax. And then finally, high quality property protects you from property taxes, because ultimately the highest quality property is going to be the hardest to tax. Compared to California, taxing of buildings in California, if I tax 5% of the real estate property in California, I'm going to get it all. If I tax 5% of the companies in California, I'm going to get that too. If I tax 5% of the Bitcoin in California, it's all going to move. And so if you're making a law in California about what to tax, what's the point in taxing something that's going to move away from you when you tax it? And so that's my way of saying, if it's the apex property, people aren't going to try to tax it as hard because it's hard to tax and they won't be successful. And so if you're not going to be successful, then there are fewer people attempting to target you as the victim. And let's say in the worst case, how are you going to tax Bitcoin in the US? You can't tax it at the LA level. You can't tax it at the California level. You have to tax it at the federal level. So I can tax it at the federal level, and then people will move out of the country. And then you say, well, that's okay. If you're a citizen, you still got to pay it. Well, then I sell it to a non-citizen. See, then the question is someone that's not a US citizen going to want to own this? And can I transfer it to them? They're not going to want to own your company in Chicago. They're not going to want to own your house on Lakeshore Drive. They're not going to want to own your ranch in Kansas. They're not going to want to own the building in New York, but they will want to own the Bitcoin. And so what you've got is this regulatory arbitrage where there will always be somewhere in the world where they're going to want this thing, and that somewhere will be the highest bidder.